Alrighty, so today we're going to start on the second part of Module 3. So this will be 3.4 and 3.5. I don't think we'll get to 3.6, but that's okay. So 3.4 is about intercepts of graphs. So we're going to talk about what an intercept is, what it means on a graph, and we're also going to talk about positive and negative parts of a graph. So our warm-up here, I do want you to try, is graphing each point on the coordinate plane. We've practiced this a little bit, but just as a reminder, when we plot our points, it's x first, then y. Our x positives are to the right, our x negatives are to the left, our y positives are up, and then our y negatives are down. So this first point, A, is at 2, 0. So the 2 is positive, so I'm going to go from my middle spot, I'm going to go right 2 and up 0 because it's not moving. So point A would be right about here, and I'm just going to label it A. B is at -2, -4. So that means I'm a negative in the x, so left 2, and -4, I'm going to go down 4 spots from that -2 and put a point right here. I'd like you to try and plot points C, D, and E on your own paper. I'll go ahead and plot those now so you can see them, but pause the video, try and plot C and D and E. That way you can see if you get them right. So point C should be right about here. D should be right about here. And then E should be here. Hopefully you got those right on your own paper. So today we're going to talk about intercepts of a function and when we're going to talk about a graph being positive or negative. And then our second part of this lesson will be about solving equations. We're not actually going to use graphing. We're going to use something slightly different here. Alrighty, so this is that learn aspect of today. So we're going to talk about intercepts. The intercepts of graphs are points where the graph intersects an axis. So it's points where the graph intersects or crosses an axis, okay? So the main key feature here is that they're points. So we're going to write them as x, y. The x-intercept is the x-coordinate of a point where the graph crosses the x-axis. So x-intercept, x-axis, okay? How we write this is we're going to write our x value, or whatever number it is, and then it's always going to be 0 in that point because the 0 will always be y since I'm not moving up or down. The y-intercept is the y-coordinate of the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. So it's the opposite now. 0 is going to come first, and then whatever our y value is, where it crosses the y-axis. So on this graph, you'll notice that there's a couple things going on. Just as a reminder, this is our x-axis, and notice that this graph has 2 points where it actually crosses that axis. The value here is one of our x-intercepts. So this is considered one of our x-intercepts, and it's at -3. Now, how I would write that out as a point is -3, 0. So that would be considered one of our x-intercepts. The other x-intercept is over here at that 2 spot, so that's our other one. You can have more than one. So there's an x-intercept at 2 also. And again, how we write that is 2, 0. Now if we look in the y direction, that would be right here because this is our y-axis. So our y-intercept, we just have 1, and that's at 6. Now when we write this one, we always write our 0 first and then our number 6. Okay, so you do have to make sure you know how to write these as ordered pairs, and this is just an example of that here. Okay, so those are our intercept pieces. The next piece we're going to look at is when a graph is positive and negative, okay? I would encourage you to have some like colored pencils or markers or crayons or highlighters or something out today because we're going to be drawing stuff on this graph, okay? So a function is positive when its graph is above the x-axis. So we're always going to be looking at our x-axis. That's, again, this axis here. That's our x, okay? Anything above that is where we're positive. So anything above that x-axis is positive. And when it's below the x-axis, that's when we're looking at stuff that's negative. So we've got positive and negative areas in our graph, okay? Now, if I look at our graph, the stuff that's positive is this stuff that's here in purple, okay? So where that starts is right here, where x is -3. And it goes until where x is equal to 2. So that purple spot starts again where x is -3 and it goes to where x is equal to 2. Thank you. So how we would write this is when x is between -3 and 2. Now there is going to be a fancier way to write this, but I like to write it in words first. The other way that we would see this is using some inequalities. So I'm just going to go ahead and write down what you would see math-wise. What's up?
Can I go to Mr. Beal's room? I'm kind of confused on
Yeah,
this.
go ahead. Yep. So in this, notice that x is between, it's in the middle of -3 and 2. So that's our fancy way we'll see it. I'll write it in both ways. That way you get both parts. But again, that's showing that x is in between those two pieces. Now, if I look on my graph here, and when it's negative, that's when we start at -3 again. But now we're going down forever and ever and ever. And this direction, my x's are getting smaller. So my x's are getting smaller because I'm going more negative as I follow that graph. So that starts at -3. So how I would write that is when x is less than or it's smaller than -3. Now it's actually negative in two parts because it's also negative starting at the 2 and going to the right now. So this, the x's are getting bigger at 2. So they get smaller as we go to the left, bigger as we go to the right. So my other interval would be when x is bigger than 2. So this symbol right here is smaller, less than. This symbol is greater than or bigger, okay? So anytime it's smaller, we use that less than symbol. Anytime it's bigger, we use that greater than symbol. Now we're going to do quite a few examples, so I know it's a lot to look at right now, but we're going to get into some examples now. Now, when it's a line, it's a lot more simple, okay? So if I look at this line, we're going to start with our intercepts, okay? Remember, x-intercept, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So right here, that would be considered my x-intercept, and it's at 1, 2, 3. Now remember when we write that as a point, it's parentheses 3, 0. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, so that's right here. And that's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we go up 6 to get to that. And again, that one, it's 0, comma, the number that we use. So linear graphs, when they're aligned, they just have two. One of each, an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Now, when it's positive, remember, we're looking at our x-axis here. Anything above is positive. Anything below is negative. So I'll use green for positive, okay? Excuse me. So green is going to be our positive. So we're always going to start at the x-axis, which again, that was at 2. And I'm getting positive as I go up and to the left, okay? As I move in that direction, my x's are smaller because they're going more to the left, and that gets us smaller x values there. Now remember, when we use smaller, we're going to use that less than symbol. And I'm always going to use the number that's with it. So that would be when x is less than 3, because that was the point here on my x-axis. I'll use purple for negative, okay? Again, starting at the x-axis, that's 3. Now we're going down into the right, but as I move in that direction, my x's are bigger. And when they're bigger, we use our greater than symbol. So x is greater than 3 would give me all of my negative y values. All right, here's another example, a check. Okay, we're trying to figure out which one closely matches this. I think it's easiest to go ahead and just mark up our picture and then pick the one or eliminate some that don't work. So here is our x-axis, that's our x-intercept. I'm going to just abbreviate x-intercept, and that's at -2. Okay, so our x-intercept's at -2. When we write this out, it's going to be -2, 0. Way down here, that's our y-intercept, and that's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at -6. Again, when we write that out, it's 0, -6. All right, so if I look at my options, there's 2 that work and 2 that don't. So A and C look pretty good, but we can go ahead and automatically cross off B and D because they have those flipped around. Okay, so now we need to check our positives and negatives. Remember, positive, we start at our X point and we're going up. Okay, as we're going up and to the left, our X's are smaller from that point. And again, we want to use that less than symbol. So they're smaller at that point at -2. So what that will look like is x less than -2. And then as we get bigger, that would be starting here and going down and to the right. As we go down and to the right, our x's are bigger because we're going to the right. And that would be then the greater than symbol. So x greater than -2 would be our interval. Knowing those 2, we can eliminate option A, and we're left with C as our final answer. All right, I think that's all I wanted to do. Or let's do this one last one. Okay, we're going to do this last one, and then that'll be it for today's notes. Okay. All right, so our x-intercept here is going to be 2 spots now, again, like the one we first saw at the beginning. So these 2 are our x-intercepts. We have 2 different ones. We've got -4 and 3. When we write those at points, we're going to write comma, -4, or -4, 0. But then we'll also have 3, 0. Our y-intercept, we just have 1. It's down there at the bottom at 12. Okay, so our y-intercept is at -12, sorry. So it'll be 0, -12. All right, it's positive when it's above the x-axis. So if I start at this point, we actually have 2 different ones. The first one is starting at x is -4, and my x's are going up and to the left. Since they're going to the left, my x's are smaller at that spot there. So again, smaller at the -4 spot. So it's going to be when x is less than -4. But then I have a second spot over here where they're also bigger in that positive spot. But here my x's are bigger because they're going to the right. So x is greater than 3. Now, where they are negative, we've got that in-between spot because it's this curve. So it's in between those two x values of -4 and 3. And again, the fancy way I can write that is -4 and 3 with the x in between, and we use those two symbols there. All right, that is the last one I want to do that goes with this section.